Spiritual pussy
enthusiasts.
spiritual pussy
Enthusiasts.
spiritual pussy
Enthusiasts.
spiritual pussy
Enthusiasts.
You must come to know yourself from a divine point of view. As long as you simply know yourself from a human point of view, you're going to have problems. But you must come to know yourself from the divine point of view. Several of the parishioners greeted me as I came through the front door a while ago and said, "Oh, Reverend Ike, I'm glad to see you back." He says, "Oh, we missed you." I said, "Well, you shouldn't have missed me. If you know me, you won't miss me. It depends on which me you know." This is the one I'm trying to forget about. This is the one I want to know. The divine me. Let me hear everyone say, the divine me.
The divine me.
Come on, say it. The divine me. And this is the mystic meaning of the words of the prophet Isaiah. Cease from man whose breath is in his nostrils. Cease to identify yourself from the human point of view and identify yourself from the divine point of view. It's always the human self that gets into trouble and that has problems. The divine self never gets into any trouble and never has any problems. And every time a problem presents itself to me, right away I remind myself that my divine self has no problem. That's why I don't deal with my problems anymore. I don't even try to solve my problems anymore. You'll catch on. Because you know exactly what self-consciousness you're in. You know, that's all you really have to do is just stop and ask yourself, what self-consciousness am I in? Too many people go completely through this segment of life without ever knowing themselves. That's why one of the greatest inscriptions ever written appeared over the door of the temple at Adelphi. Man, know thyself. And all that you ever need to do is to know yourself correctly. You don't need to struggle or strain with anyone or with any situation or circumstances. All you ever need to do is know yourself correctly. To help other people, that's all you need to do. Know yourself correctly. Because all that you can ever give to another is your own self-consciousness. I read quite a few of the letters and the prayer requests last night and today, and various people describing various situations that they need help with. And I asked myself, now how shall I help these people? And the answer comes by knowing myself correctly. For the only thing that can help another is my identity of myself. Because all that I can ever experience or express is my own concept of myself. And we need to take all of this energy that we use trying to solve a problem in knowing the divine self of ourselves. Because when you discover the divine self, when you touch the divine self, you discover that the divine self has no problem. And I'm excited because I think I'm growing. I know I am. Next year I'll be speaking even in another tongue. But I think I have found the technique. Now listen to this for a moment, because, you know, challenges come to all of us. But I found it much easier to know myself as the divine self which has no problem, rather than struggling with problems. Because human self might solve one problem, but as soon as it solves one problem, it'll have another one. On simply the human level, I might heal you of a headache, but by the time I get you healed of the headache, old age will catch up with you. But you can be done with the human scene once and for all, even before you leave this dimension. So that when you actually leave this dimension, it won't be any big thing to you at all. You'll be transformed even before you make your transition. And it's interesting, even as I look back into the hymnal of the old church, you can see where several of the hymn writers, many of them from time to time, they crossed the border in consciousness. For example, the hymn writer that wrote the hymn, I am dwelling in Beulah land, that was pure divine consciousness. That's what I'm talking about. All right. So I'm going to suggest to you this new way of, let's say, meeting a problem. Anytime you meet a problem, then you know you're not where you're supposed to be. You get out of me into me. See, I know I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I know I'm not identifying myself correctly. Then I have to do as the old down-home spiritual says, move in the room with the Lord. So I want to introduce you tonight to the divine self of you which does not have a problem, which has never had a problem, and which will never have a problem. And this is what the psalmist spoke of when he said, he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. All right, this goes right into the lesson that we're going to study formally tonight, the nature of my true self. I'm going to have the Science of Living Institute find out who this quotation came from, one of the great men like Emerson. But let's read it together, the first quotation. The infinite lies within you, stretched in smiling repose. Now you think about that. It'll keep you from getting upset. And if you ever get upset, just sit down and think about that for a moment. The infinite lies within you, stretched in smiling repose. Think about the Christ mind, and let the Christ mind be within you. Whenever some human reason for me to be upset appears, I always say to myself, wait a minute, do you know that the divine mind is not upset? So let's make a personal affirmation out of that. The divine mind within me is not upset. Together? The divine mind within me is not upset. And I don't care how upset your human sense of self gets. The infinite lies within you, stretched in smiling repose. And every time I read this, do you know how I visualize the infinite? I visualize the infinite inside of me on a hammock, tied to two trees. And that beautiful quotation from that old hymn, again showing divine consciousness. Humans through many scenes are drawn, and vexed with trifling cares, while thine eternal thought moves on, thine undisturbed affairs. There is something, capital S, within me that is never disturbed. Together, there is something within me that is never disturbed. And you have to learn to identify yourself with that, T, capital T. You have to learn to identify yourself as that. Because whatever you identify yourself with and as, you experience that. So why should you always go around identifying yourself with that which is upset, rather than that which lies within you, stretched in smiling repose? Isn't it wonderful to know God never gets upset? Now the God of man's creating gets upset. You see, some of you read the Bible and you don't know the difference between the different gods that you read about even in the Bible. It's a long subject. We'll get into that another time. But the infinite is never upset. Divine principle is never disturbed. And you have to come to that point of divine self-identity where you can say with Paramahansa Yogananda, I am He, I am He. Blessed Spirit, I am He. Cease from man whose breath is in his nostrils. What are you identifying yourself as? Who are you identifying yourself as? Who and what are you identifying yourself with? That's the question. Here again, you really never have any trouble with anybody but yourself. I am the only person that I ever have any trouble with. It's quiet, but let's say it together. It'll come to you if you don't get it now. Come on, let's say it. I am the only person that I ever have any trouble with. And it's good to know that, and I say that to myself because I know that if anybody gives me trouble, it's me, and since it's me, I can straighten me out. It's that human sense of self. I'll never forget the lesson that Reverend Ike gave us. I meet no one but me. I read that again and again. I have it on tape, and I listen to it. And every time I meet somebody that comes the wrong way, I'll say, well, I don't know why I'm acting like this. Absolutely. You try that on yourself. Now, the next time somebody acts up with you, you say, I wonder why am I acting like this? The mean boss is you. And what really got me was when Reverend Ike said, even the dog that bites you is you. I said, my goodness, Reverend. But it's true. All you ever meet is some facet of your own self-concept. That's why you should have a divine concept of yourself, because that human concept of self comes at you in so many different ways. It puts you through so many different changes. You see, all of the doubts that you have about yourself come back at you as other people. If anybody ever cheats you, that means that somewhere on the inside you have cheated yourself. If anybody's ever unfair to you, it means that somewhere on the inside of you, you've been unfair to yourself. So then go quickly to your divine self-identity and know that the infinite lies within you, stretched in smiling repose. And let us read together the 37th Psalm, the 37th verse. Together, mark the perfect man, and behold the upright. For the end of that man is peace. And who is this perfect man? Who is this upright? It's your divine self. It's your real, true self. So look away from the imperfections of human selfhood and look to the perfection of your divine selfhood. The real self of you has never known sin, because the real self of you is God. Let's read together this affirmation. My divine self is all that God is, for it is God living in me, through me, and as me. Let's read it together again. My divine self is all that God is, for it is God living in me, through me, and as me. The nature of my true divine self is healthy, happy, loving, successful, and prosperous. And I'm healthy, happy, loving, and beloved, successful, and prosperous. Why? Because it is the nature of my true divine self. So here again, the question always is, am I thinking about my divine nature, or am I thinking about my human nature? We should always know this. And this wonderful scripture from the book of Job. Let's read that together. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Thereby good shall come unto thee. You see, so you've been acquainting yourself with the wrong concept of yourself. And this is what we do in these classes. This is what we do in these services here. We teach you to acquaint yourself with the divinity of you. And there are certain things which are natural to the divine self. Health, for example, is the nature of the divine self. And health is divinely natural. I always smile whenever I read or hear that someone died of natural causes. And people used to go to the witchcraft workers to find out if their sickness was natural. And I'm going to tell you right now, no, your sickness is not natural. Yeah. Health is natural. Say that with me. Health is natural. It's natural for you to be healthy. And we'll make a personal affirmation out of that. It's natural for me to be healthy. Come on. It is natural for me to be healthy. Now, I'd like to expand on that even further and say, it is divinely natural for me to be healthy. Together, it is divinely natural for me to be healthy. You know, in the world mind would have you believe that it's natural to be sick. And if you don't get all of those sicknesses that go around, why, people think you're oddball. And I've had people say to me, yes, Reverend Ike, but you know, you got to have something to take you out of this world. Now, I don't need sickness to take me out of this world. I can find better ways of going now. And people are just conditioned to this. You can choose how you leave this world. You can program it. As a matter of fact, you do anyway, either consciously or unconsciously. Like, for example, we talk about accidents, and no such thing as accidents. But most people live unconsciously. But remember that health is divinely natural. And it is the wish of God in you that you should be healthy. And I love to read this scripture from 3 John. Let's read it together. Beloved, I wish that you would be in health. People have their minds mixed up as to what God's will is. Well, if it's the Lord's will for me to suffer, I'll just have to suffer. Well, you know you have to suffer. Maybe so, but I've done mine. And I ain't gonna study war no more. I did mine when I didn't know any better. But now that I do stand awake, I my throne do wisely take, and rule my kingdom, which is me, a master through eternity. So you just remember that sickness is no part of God's plan for you. Let us know also that happiness is divinely natural. And I'm sure some of us, anyway, know of religious people who seem to think that in order to please the Lord, you have to be miserable, at least to a certain extent. And do you know there are people who have so much religion that they feel guilty to feel happy? Like people who say, how can you sit down here and eat all of this good food? These Americans over here eating all this good food and other people are starving. I said, well, hell, it won't help me to starve with them. I'm not going to be miserable because other people are starving. That doesn't make my steak taste any less good. Somebody said the other day, yes, the Americans are eating themselves to death while others are starving to death. I said, well, if I had a choice, I would choose the former. And some people think that, well, maybe because somebody else is miserable that, you should be miserable too. And there are people, you got to watch your friends and your relatives. Sometimes they'll get themselves into some kind of a situation. And if you don't be miserable with them, they'll be insulted. And it is true, yes, misery does love company. When the news of Lazarus' death reached Jesus and his disciples, you remember some of the disciples said, well, Lord, let's go and die with him. But happiness is divinely natural. And don't you think for one moment that your being miserable is going to help the miserable. Your being hungry won't help the hungry. Your being needy will not help the needy. It just creates more need. And the best thing that you can do for poor people is to not be one of them. That will reduce the population of poverty at least by one. Let there be wealth on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be happiness on earth, and let it begin with me. So you remember that. One of the best ways you can help people who are sad is by not being one of them. Now, I never want anybody to pity me anyway. Oh, you poor thing, you. I feel. And you know, you have to watch that sympathy. Sympathy can be a deadly thing to the person that you give it to. As a matter of fact, sympathy is a terrible thing even to give yourself. Sympathy kills you if you give it to yourself. Now, some people have just buried themselves in self-pity. And self-pity always magnetizes you for pitiful things to happen to you. That's why you get all kicked around and pushed around. You pity yourself. And when you pity yourself, you're asking for something to give you a reason to pity yourself. That's what you're asking for. If you pity yourself, you're asking for a kick in the behind. And you are going to get it.